my son Matthew. Very grateful to everybody for being here tonight. It's a very special crowd, and there are a lot of people who are with us in spirit all around the country who, because of the timing and the shock that attended this event in all of our lives, the surprise, unexpected, tragic passing of a vibrant human being who played an important role, not only in our lives, but in the lives of countless thousands of people around the world through her radio, television, and writing. Just can't even begin to tell you. So we're going to have some stories tonight, and at the end of the program, it'll be a brief program. Everybody who's speaking, please keep it to 5 minutes or so. We'll have this wireless mic. I will go in the audience, and if anybody wants to add anything or tell a story or share their feelings at the end, we will do that. We have coffee, we have cake, we have some food. If you'd like to grab a bite, there'll be time to get it at the end. And again, I have deep gratitude to all of you for being here. I'm your co-host, and co-hosting with me is one of the finest gentlemen that I have ever had the pleasure of meeting in this business or anywhere else. He's nationally syndicated by Salem Radio Network, and he's a good friend of everybody in the business. He himself is a humanitarian and a very charitable individual, and a good friend, Mike Gallagher.
This is Joy's kind of gathering. She would have loved this. In fact, I can almost just see her flitting around in the back, telling us where to go, what to do, what the order would be like, who should go when and where. And it's kind of interesting to walk into this room. Shortly after my wife died a few years ago, Joy gave me some terrific advice, and she, as she was wont to do, she'd tell you how to get through the day and what you're supposed to do and what not to do. And she told me how much she loved the story I told about the sunflowers. So, and it's just a quick story. My wife loved sunflowers, and while she was fighting cancer, a bizarre sunflower popped up in front of our house, 6 feet tall, in just 1 week when we were away on a trip. And we always said to each other, that's a thing. That's something else besides this world. And so to walk in tonight and see all those sunflowers on this picture of Dr. Joy, which was totally unplanned, sort of reminds me that this is a very special woman and a very special night indeed. And again, on behalf of Joy and her family and her millions of fans, thank you for being here tonight. Very few people ever embodied her name like Joy, who brought joy everywhere she went. She was this quirky, fun, funny, life-loving individual. And it's been said that you know you're really somebody when you get a hell of an obituary in the New York Times. Boy, did she get a hell of an obituary in the New York Times. And it's just easy to look at the obituary and lift some passages from it. Michael Harrison, of course, who is the great ambassador and advocate for our industry and for whom Joy adored, was quoted in the obituary as confirming that she was the absolute longest running radio psychologist in terrestrial radio at the time of her passing, which is an incredible achievement for our business. I mean, you think about it, she was at it well before anybody else and did it in a different kind of way. In fact, I think we've got the clip, right? Because do we have that audio clip? This was my engineer and my producer found vintage Joy, because she wasn't the kind of radio psychologist, and I'm not going to name names here because I don't want to create any feuds, but some would say no question is too stupid, and you'd call and that'd be the first thing out of her mouth. That's a stupid question. Joy didn't believe in that. She believed in nurturing and giving advice and lifting people up rather than tearing them down, and we found just a really quick clip that personified Dr. Joy Browne.
Mark?
What is it that you want me to say? Yes, Gene, you are in the loser category, and you know, I don't know why you're even, wandering around this earth because, nothing's going to work. That's not what I want to say. That's not who I am. That's not what I do, and I don't believe it. I'm not God. I'm a psychologist. And I think that there are probably as many people who are perfectly happy not being in a relationship as there are people who are happy being in a relationship, and there are an awful lot of people who are miserable in relationships. So if you're going to define someone else as being the only thing that can make you happy, you're going to be in trouble.
That was Joy. In that great obituary, she said, she was quoted as saying, "I'm in the business of making lives better, not by bashing, but by teaching people how to take responsibility for their behavior." And on one program she was quoted, and again in that obit, she said, "If we can figure out a way to get to the moon, wipe out disease, double life expectancy, don't you think we can be a little nicer to each other? Maybe. I know, I believe in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy as well," she said with a laugh. Now, for those of us who talk in the contentious world of talk radio, especially this year, it's always a delight to remember that spirit, that wonderful, joyful spirit of Joy Browne. She was also, of course, an accomplished author. Among her titles, The 9 Fantasies That Will Ruin Your Life, It's a Jungle Out There, Jane, Getting Unstuck, Dating Disasters, and Dating for Dummies, which included this very important dating preparation tip. If you have fingernail marks on the palms of your hands, you're a little too tense. That is Joy. A classic, a one of a kind, and will never be replicated. Now, she certainly shared the airwaves with some superstar talents. Our first speaker is someone who has been rightly called the First Lady of New York radio. Her career, her brilliant career, goes back to the early 70s when she replaced the legendary Bob Grant at WMCA. One of my thrills when I first moved to New York City as a theater geek was to sit 2 rows behind Joan and say, "Oh my gosh, it's Joan Hamburg, it's Joan Hamburg." A lot of us had that kind of, she had that impact on a lot of people. Spent 35 years broadcasting weekdays on WOR, and of course created millions and millions of loyal followers. She's currently heard weekends on 77 WABC, and she knew Joy very, very well. Please join me in welcoming Joan Hamburg.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We all worked together for years. In fact, Joy would really be annoyed that she missed this party. All that food and all of us. And you know, Hillary Clinton had said it takes a village. We really were a village. We were a mom and pop station. We all took care of each other, and we all supported each other through the good and the bad. And Dr. Joy was one of the world's great characters. She was glitter. She was sparkle. She was sequins. She was Peter Pan. In fact, because we all worked together so many years, we all arrived at the point when her daughter became older than Dr. Joy. You did not discuss age with Dr. Joy. She was a public person, but incredibly private in her own personal life. She was a real estate czar. In fact, I credit Joy for gentrifying the city of New York. The first apartment, she said, "You've got to see what I bought. It's a penthouse." We go into a neighborhood, and I remember like a jerk, I said to her, "Is it safe here?" We were all clutching our possessions. She had the last laugh. 6 months later, the entire neighborhood started changing, and that penthouse was drop dead and featured in magazine articles, and she kept buying penthouses in neighborhoods that were changing. She was a very smart businesswoman. She knew how to do it. Joy loved celebrations. Every holiday, especially her birthday, although we were never allowed to discuss what year it was. And she would celebrate with chocolate, her favorite thing. Joy had all of us observing Lent. I said, "Joy, I'm Jewish." She said, "What the heck? You've got to give something up. We all observe Lent." So, next thing you know, all of WOR is sacrificing for Lent. "What are you giving up?" she would say, and watch us. It was her. She cured all of us. Now, I know we have a very famous doctor who worked for WOR and still works for many years, but Joy said she went to medical school, so she became the unofficial doctor. something hurt you? Dr. Joy, what should I take? And she prescribed, she would hold office hours, and it was very exciting, and Joy loved a bargain. When she arrived at WOR, and some of you remember this, wheeling a cart filled with clothes, we knew that her television show had hit the dust. Now, she had a lot of TV shows, but all the clothes from the show would arrive at the radio station, and we would shop. We made it a party. And then ultimately, what we didn't buy, she had to return. Everything was on a bargain, including her real estate. And Joy, who would call us Kiddo or Cookie. At this point, I can't remember anyone's name, so I thought she really was onto something. Kiddo or Cookie. And she would say to all of us, Kiddo, come to the studio and let me give you this picture. You go to Joy's studio, now radio studios, nothing glamorous or gorgeous, and in her studio, a huge scarf, one of her bargains, would be hanging over the lamp. There would be candles burning. What could be more dangerous in a radio studio? Incense. And there was Dr. Joy, like a wonderful Buddha, sitting on a yoga ball. You know what a yoga ball is like? She would have her producer, I think it was Scott at the time, he would have to wheel this monster down the hall. It could barely fit in the door. And she would balance on the yoga ball for hours, giving her advice. And you knew it was uncomfortable, which is why she was so cranky on the air a lot of times. But she would do it. And she tried to take care of us. One day she came in, and my producer at the time, who's now become super agent, Heather Cohen, she said, "You women are really bad. You don't work out." I said, "Joy, Dr. Joy, I open the freezer every day. It's the best for your upper arms." And Heather too, she said, "You've got to come to the gym." She had the secret. "I have a coupon," she said. So we all went off to the gym. There was Joy doing splits, headstands, meditations, all with her eyes closed. There was Heather and me. We couldn't even get off the floor. It took a village even then to get us out of the gym. That was our first and last experience. We used to have an expression, we're going to go to the gym to visit our money, because of course Dr. Joy made us belong. So we would go to the gym, "Hello, money," and then disappear. We never worked out. I wanted to mention, very few people know, Joy was one of the most charitable women in the entire world. We made fun of how parsimonious she was sometimes, but this woman had a huge heart. And she had a foundation, she personally gave to every unsung charity, especially those that helped women and children, and did it without any press, without anyone knowing. And 9/11, one of the first volunteers was Dr. Joy, and she knew how dangerous it was. And she was there serving food for weeks on end. And then when Sandy Hook, that terrible tragedy with the death of all those children, came along, I wasn't working that day. My daughter Lizzie took over my show. And you know, she wasn't a broadcaster, Lizzie, and overwhelmed by what had happened. Dr. Joy slipped into the studio, said to Liz, "It's okay, just follow my lead," and took her through hours on that horrific day. Never said a word to anyone, left, went back on her yoga ball, because she was doing syndication and network when it was all over. So she was quite remarkable. She was bigger than life, Joy, no matter what. And she loved so many things. She loved the movies with a passion. She loved her chocolate. She loved her daughter. And she loved her listeners. And one of my favorite Dr. Joy stories, because she always got right to the point. I was giving a speech to a group of very elderly people, and the person who had asked me to talk was part of a major hospital and said, "These people are depressed. They need to get rid of their fears. you have to help them. So Dr. Joy said, what are you writing? I told her, and she said, well, I can help you. She was the station shrink after all. And she said, tell me what you're afraid of. Dr. Joy, I'm afraid of dying young. Well, kiddo, she said, it's too late for that. That was Dr. Joy. She had a boundless joy, and everything she did, including all of us, her extended family. And that obituary that you talked about before, who would have appreciated that more than Dr. Joy? I know she's got it framed wherever she is. She's probably buying penthouses upstairs. Again, thank all of you for coming and sharing these few recollections. She shall be missed, and she has helped thousands of people whom she gave life to. So, and we are grateful for her friendship. Thank you all.
Joan mentioned Scott, the producer. All of us who have shows have producers who know everything about us, the good, the bad, the not so good. Bernadette Duncan is one of those legendary producers. She has worked more than 26 years in talk radio as a producer. In fact, she wrote the book recently about being a producer, and I don't know that anybody's written as wonderful a book as this one, Yappy Days, Behind the Scenes with Newsers, Schmoozers, Boozers, and Losers. I don't think there's anybody in this room who qualifies. She's married to Talkers magazine publisher Michael Harrison. Please join me in welcoming Bernadette Duncan.
Thank you, Mike, and hello everybody. You can be sure that Dr. Joy Browne would be thrilled to learn that this venue, the Helen Mills Theater, is also the official location for the New York Arts Foundation of Flamenco Dancers. Because Joy, as everybody knows, was a killer dancer. But of course, radio was Dr. Joy's thing. And as many folks here also know, 4 weeks ago, after the news about Joy settled in, Michael Harrison was tapped to transition the Dr. Joy Browne radio show through its final days. And during those early days, through his own shocking grief, Michael had the job of holding the hands of listeners and callers, some dialing in with favorite Joy Browne memories, and others offering up favorite Joy sayings, like we all know stupid and cheerful. That is one of her regular sayings. Still others described how she stitched their lives back together with a few comforting words so to make sense of the world again. Many others called to express their shock, having just heard the news, or why when they turned on their radios, Dr. Joy Browne wasn't there anymore. Michael had to go into industry battlefield medic mode, as he called it, to talk a lot of these folks through. And there was so much emotion pouring out of the radio in those early days. It was exhausting. One chap, a fellow calling from England, described his own bereavement. Just after he had heard the news about Joy, he said he noticed the bathroom light bulb flickering, which he said it hadn't done since its mother had died 10 years earlier. Joy, he said, obviously had come to visit with him. It was clear that Joy's callers felt extraordinarily close to her. And so it makes perfect sense that here we are tonight, colleagues, neighbors, a former boyfriend, friends who shared coffees, outings to movies and plays, or philanthropic projects, that we too are loaded with great memories. 4 weeks ago, I attacked Facebook with the objective to find the many people in Joy's life who were doused with her pixie dust. And I did not expect to also encounter stories of great inspiration. The 35-year-old woman in Chicago who was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, whom Joy befriended and regularly emailed. Then there was a couple, a nurse and fireman, who met her in the aftermath of 9/11 and now live in Florida. And then the many people sitting in this room, the emails, and the shock that we were swapping back and forth, the world paused to take in its loss. Of course, I have a few of my own memories, which I will treasure. Joyce and my adventure shopping for bathing suits. Her crazy pick was a beige metallic-y thongy thingy, reduced from its original price tag of $185 to like $18, because it was like this little piece of material. Then another memory, her visit to my parents' house for Thanksgiving one day back in the 80s. And the word she used to describe my parents was surreal, because they were so Ozzie and Harriet. More recently, in the fashion of Thelma and Louise, she and I, two gals from New York City who love our subways and don't drive or don't drive well, we brainstormed how were we supposed to get around Florida without the R train. In typical fashion, Joy found a solution. She invested in an adult-sized, shiny blue tricycle and parked it in its own space in her apartment building garage among the Mercedes, the Jaguars, the Mini Coopers, and there it was parked in its own space. Perhaps my favorite memory of all was the secret room. In fact, one in each apartment, both Florida and New York. Back in March, when Michael and I were visiting her in Florida, she walked me through this bright white apartment to a specially constructed space, which was long and narrow like a subway car, about 25 feet long, and she opened the door to the contents that were blindingly colorful. So much so, I felt like I was standing inside a giant box of Crayola crayons. But the modern version with the sparkles, dresses and blouses glittered, like Joan Hamburg was just saying. It glittered with rhinestones in there, silver threaded details. A few were trimmed with black faux fur, and still others had feathers on them. And there were shoes all over the floor and matching everything. And then one by one, she was tugging open drawers with each containing different style earrings. The feathers, the dangly crystal kinds, all these colorful earrings. That was Joy Browne. She lived life big and in living color. And I know you feel as I do. We're all lucky to have known her.
It always fascinates me how cheerful, joyful people always circle around and have cheerful, joyful people in their orbit, as Bernadette demonstrated, and our next speaker. This is one of the most cheerful, optimistic, joyful people I've ever met. He is an extremely accomplished news talk radio program director. He's currently the GM of Talk News Radio. He managed WOR for a decade during the time that Joy worked at the station. And they were very, very dear friends all the way up to her passing. Please join me in welcoming David Bernstein.
Thank you, sir. If I didn't do that, Joy, wherever she is, would be mad at me. Because Joy wanted to have fun. Joy lived to have fun, and as her boss, I mean, how do you be a boss to somebody like Dr. Joy Browne? She was in control from the day I walked in to the day I left. She knew everything that was going on. Remember, she was the station psychologist. So everybody went, Dr. Joy, I got an issue with my boyfriend. I got an issue with my boss. I got an issue with my wife. I got an issue. Well, she knew all the dirt at the station. I tried to get really close because I just wanted to know what the dirt was. But Joy was loyal to whoever she spoke to. And she didn't share a thing. She was also extremely generous. And, you know, we could talk, we all know Joy. We all miss her terribly. The missing part is just the beginning. Just wait as we go through our next cycle without Joy. I think maybe the best way to look at her generosity had nothing to do with radio. It happened to be a radio event. Mark Seligman, you'll remember this, A Taste of New York, which we did, and Joan Hamburg, and of course all our personalities, Dr. Ron Hoffman, Jerry Crowley put that together. And it was a wonderful event, and it ends and everybody's leaving, and there's Joy. So Joy looks at me and she says, David, are you heading downtown? I said, yeah. You need a ride? She went, if you're going. And I said, yeah, come on. I had my wife and my mother and father, because I had brought them to the event. So now there's the 5 of us squeezed in this little car. So we drive down to Joy's apartment, and she says, well, you gotta come in, you gotta see it. I mean, it's pretty, so we go in. And I know my parents are going like, this is bizarre, but this is wonderful, because I know Dr. Joy from seeing her every day. They know Dr. Joy as this brilliant individual on the radio. We're up in her apartment, we're hanging out. My wife says, she kind of moves like that, and Joy says, you okay? Debbie said, yeah, I have this like kick in my back. Follow me. We're all in the bathroom, she's filling up the jacuzzi, and now you have Dr. Joy, my wife, me, and my gray-haired parents in the jacuzzi. Water is splashing, my father's looking at me like, this is wonderful, get me out of here. But she had so much fun being the hostess. She wanted us there. She made us enjoy it. And you know what? That was personal time. It was impromptu, it was exciting, it's a little daring because it wasn't the normal boss-employee relationship. And at the same time, I'm standing here today telling you the story because it meant so much to me. We were a team, and yes, Joan is right. We were a village. There was not the hierarchy corporate thing. And Joy knew it, because Joy, one day when we were having one of those corporate days where we all sat at a long conference table in the conference room with the door closed and everybody's got the suit and tie and dress, and the door opens up and it's Joy wearing a neck to toe red fur coat. Now we're sitting there being our corporate fools that we are, and Joy comes flitting in. Hello! And the purpose, so we're looking at her and we're all starting to laugh. And she said, you guys are just so damn corporate. You look ridiculous. Get in the real world. Have some fun. Woo! And she did, and she made everybody laugh. And we realized, yeah, this is no time for a meeting. We all left. This is what Joy did for us. And this is just one of the many, many inside stories. I'll leave you with one which is less of a story and more something to think about. I listen to Joy's show every day, virtually. The whole show was on, sitting in my office. And I picked up on something that I heard over and over and over again. And I asked her about it. I said, you've said something that somehow, some way, got stuck in my head. She said, what's that? I said, it's 3 words. Compared to what? The 3 words that she said, more often than any others, were compared to what? And when you go home tonight and tomorrow and next week and next month, I want you to take those 3 words with you. They've gotten me out of more trouble than I care to tell you. But you're going to find that no matter what your situation, no matter what you're dealing with, there's a good solution when you have to make a choice. And that solution is simple. It's Joy's solution. Compared to what? Take that with you, and when it comes out of you, do what I do. Thank Joy, and thank God that you knew her.
The celebration of Joy. He's one of the longest running syndicated hosts in our business. He has been a dear friend and colleague of Joy's for decades, and Bernadette alluded to this earlier. I think this is the former boyfriend she alluded to. He even dated her for a while, a number of years ago. Please join me in welcoming Doug Steffen.
Take a knees break.
There you go.
There's a certain amount of emotion that goes with anything like this when you remember, you're sort of required to remember things that maybe you don't want to remember. There's not anything about Joy in my experience, which goes back actually 30 years. I was doing an afternoon program at the old 1510 in Boston, which was call lettered at the time WITS. It was WMEX, it was legendary radio station, and that was her first job. And I remember meeting her and being taken back. Bernstein had some thoughts about what it was like to have her around and analyze you. She was analysis paralysis. It was she would tell you, and I've always been curious, frankly, about this because I think we all need to know more about ourselves. We can certainly help ourselves the more we know about ourselves. That was one of the things that attracted me to Joy. She was selfless in helping people and giving people advice, and you knew that she knew what she was talking about. So anyway, from when I first got to know her in the 80s, to her foray at OR and then her subsequent other experiences on the radio and television, we became close for a while. I dated two shrinks in my life. One of them was a Los Angeles shrink, one of them was a New York shrink. I will tell you that I was far better off getting advice from Joy than I was getting advice from the lady in California. But that's what brought us together, but that's also what separated us, because I don't know whether you want to, it's maybe boundaries is the right word. It was difficult to go to her apartment, fix a leak in the skylight, and then after that was over, have it analyzed as to why I did it the way I did it. And there were all of these things. She came to my farm a number of times in Framingham, Massachusetts, and I was interested, I think Bernadette was talking about her driving or not driving. I had a 5-speed Ford pickup truck, and she, when I was out in the field working, she would come visit, and she decided she would teach herself how to drive this pickup truck. And there was a stone wall at the corner of this one field that existed when she drove in, but didn't exist when she drove out. But she didn't want anybody to teach her. She wanted to learn herself how to do it. And that was that was the joy of her being. She learned for herself, was a great teacher and a learned scholar. But I will tell you one thing, maybe because I'll get emotional if I get too far down into the weeds here. People who do this for a living, not only radio people, there's a certain thing in deference to my pal Mike and others who, and the respect I have for Joan and the number of years she's been on, and other people here who have certainly either been on the air or seen people who are on the air, and whether we're good at it or not, I think depends on how well we understand ourselves or don't understand ourselves. I asked Joy on many occasions how she healed herself, how she filled herself, how she rewarded, how did she get back what she gave. A lot of it came, again, knowing what I know about her family a little bit goes a long way, but she became who she was because of where she came from. We all are that way. But she especially needed to be in touch with herself because of where she came from. And I think that she had a deep well. The people who knew her well knew that she had that deep well inside of her, a reservoir of feelings, of intelligence, of remarkable perception. And those things, I think, carried her through, where others who were not as strong as she was would have not been able to do as reliably, as well, as proficiently as she did, day in and day out. Whether she was on the air or not, you knew that what she told you was what she really thought, and that was a blessing. And I'm very happy to have known her.
The Genesis Communications Network was very wise to snatch Joy up when she was a free agent. This is the radio network that was syndicating the Dr. Joy program to affiliates all across the United States. And we're very, very honored to have with us tonight the CEO and founder of Genesis Communications Network. He flew in from Minneapolis to be with us this evening. Please join me in welcoming Ted Anderson.
Well, what a wonderful thing to hear the friends and the people that were close to Joy speak. I only had a business relationship with Joy, but it was a very good business relationship. I started out listening to Joy Browne, gosh, I can't even remember when she got started, in Minneapolis, but it was quite some time ago that Hubbard Broadcasting, one of the largest stations in Minneapolis, put Joy on the air. And I was very impressed. I mean, I love listening to talk radio long before I ever got into the business. Click and Clack was real popular at that time, Joy Browne was as well. So that was my first introduction to Dr. Joy Browne. I thought she was all class. What a wonderful, beautiful person, and the personality that came up. That's my experience with Dr. Joy Browne. Now, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Michael Harrison and Matthew and Bernadette for putting this together, and whoever else was involved. What a wonderful thing to do. Secondly, Michael Harrison took it on himself to put together a memorial on her own radio show to share it with the listeners so they could actually say what they wanted to say, and all the, like this times, hundreds of thousands of people. So I'm really, really grateful for that as well. Joy Browne was working with WOR. She had a short business relationship with Radio America as well. And then I met her at the Talkers events that Michael Harrison puts on. And it wasn't too long before she asked me if she could come on the Genesis Network and do a radio show with my company. And I just, people are telling me, you really helped her out, and I just couldn't believe that I had this wonderful opportunity to have such an icon in the industry on my talk radio network. I was just totally impressed with that. And so I was very happy to have her come. And then to find out she's such a real down-to-earth person that everybody loved working with her. My sales department, my production crew. Joy was a joy. Like you said, she lived her name. She just really made producing radio a wonderful thing. And I can tell you, that doesn't always happen. It's not always easy. It can be tough. Joy made it great. She'd send me emails, how's this going on? She'd call me the boss, and kiddo as well. I heard that from her as well. So maybe that was it. I mean, I have a hard time remembering names. She just had it down. She just was such a pleasant person to work with. And I really don't have a whole lot more to say because of the fact that I've only known her for just such a short period of time. She died way too soon and way too sudden. For me, the experience was like this. I came in the morning. One of my producers looked at me. She said, "Ted, Dr. Joy had just died this weekend. And we got to figure out what to do. We're going to put on a rebroadcast of her show, and we'll get things rolling. And I want her memory to live on as long as possible. As long as people are willing to come to our servers, download the files, listen to the show, they're going to be available. And I just want to say thanks for having this event, and thanks for including me on it as well. So thanks.
This is a neat story. This next speaker was a high school intern at WITS AM in Boston back in 1979 when he began working with Joy and booking guests for her radio show. Their careers took them to the same cities, San Francisco and ultimately New York. And over the course of the many years together in friendship, they would have dinner to celebrate Joy's birthday, and that is a treasured slot. If you're celebrating Joy's birthday with her over dinner, you know how much he meant to her. Now that Former high school intern, is Chief Insights Officer at Cumulus Westwood One. Please join me in welcoming Pierre Bouvard.
So I thought I was the only one that got kiddo. So that was not the deal. So WITS was an interesting station. The call letters actually stood for something: information, talk, and sports. We were 50,000 watts straight out to the ocean. So I was this intern, and I'm trying to show my mom and dad, this is our station, and be like, shh. So it was kind of hard to hear in the suburbs. What's amazing about Joy, I was a kid, but she treated me with such dignity and such respect. She was so fun to be around and so full of instructions on how I dressed and watch out for this girl, and my head was spinning with all the information. When I graduated from college, I ended up as a trainer for Arbitron in San Francisco, and she was there at KGO. So I started the tradition of taking her out for dinner for her birthday. And what blew me away about her was, when you heard her on the air, every call was so concise and short, and she got right to the issues. And then I would go out to dinner, and I'd start to hear, some of what was going on in her private life, and it went on for a while. I would be like, wow, gosh, I can't believe that guy, Joy, it's amazing. And so I'd be like, I'm just hearing a little bit of what's happening in her life. Then she goes to New York to do overnights on WABC, and I happened to join Arbitron in New York, and the dinners would continue. And then the movies started. Boy, did she love movies. And I would get these calls like, hey, I'm going to the screening. And I mean, I think in the 80s, I saw every movie, good, bad, and ugly. And it was clear that when I came to these screenings, everybody knew who she was. And then we would talk about the movies after. She loved the TV stuff. There was a guy, Alan Thicke, who had a show called Thick of the Night, and he loved her. And she was always on her show. The other thing I loved about her is how nice she was on the air. She was sweet and kind. And in the world of talk radio, that is not always the case, to be kind and sweet on the air. And I always remember how wonderful she was. The other thing I was always hear about, Patience, and her daughter. And Patience, the first time I met her, I think she was probably a teenager, and she was like just as tall as Joy. Just like incredibly tall, and she was always so proud of her, and I was always kind of catch up with Patience, hearing about her, getting her marine biology degree in San Francisco. So I always heard a lot about her family. It's amazing. It almost was 40 years with her, and I had such true joy to spend time with her and wish her happy birthday. And I'm just so privileged to have met her such an early time in my life, and just she meant so much to me. Thank you so much.
It's been already acknowledged that Joy was incredibly philanthropic. Our next speaker is proof positive of that. She's the Director of Development with the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, former Vice President of Development and Communications for Habitat for Humanity, New York City. She worked very, very closely with Dr. Joy on her philanthropic causes. They became very, very dear friends. And the good news is that Tracy is now working closely with Joy's daughter and sister on keeping the mission of the Dr. Joy to the World Foundation alive. Please join me in welcoming Tracy Kramer.
Well, I can just say that I'm honored to be among all of you, her friends, who were with her for so many years, and I only got to be with her for such a short time. Our friendship spans Just a couple of years. I moved into the area in 2012, and I started working at Habitat in about 2013, and that's where I got to meet Dr. Joy. I will point out that I made a almost fatal error at one point in meeting with her. I brought her almond cake. It wasn't chocolate, so I almost lost it. But she sent me a text a couple of hours later after I dropped off this almond cake with her, and she said, "That's like crack." So all was well in the universe. But during the tribute shows that were hosted by Michael Harrison, I heard Bernadette share a quote that Joy had actually also shared with me. The meaning of life is to find your gift, and your purpose in life is to give it away. And that quote just captures the heart and soul of Joy to me. I first met her working at Habitat, and I can tell you the crazy, wacky stories and trips that we went on. What I loved about her, she wasn't a typical donor. I would call her, and there might be some other fundraisers in the room. But a lot of times I call people and I try to introduce myself and I try to get that face-to-face meeting. Joy was an instant yes. There was no hesitation. She said yes when? Tomorrow. Like, she was urgent about it, and she wanted to get to know more about our organization. So I now work at the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and I've been there for a little while, and Joy was part of counseling me as I made my transition through my career. From the time that we met, I wanted to share this first experience where we met. When I called her and I asked her if she wanted to meet with me, she said, "Sure, let's meet at the Ritz-Carlton." And I didn't know what to expect, because I had heard her for years on the radio myself. I listened to her on and off over the years, and I just didn't know what to expect. I've seen her covers of books and little things. You do your research. But when I saw her walk in that room, I knew it was going to be a joyride. She showed up in pigtail braids, which was something that I thought was always fantastic, because she was always telling me, she was always recommending a hairstylist for me at every moment. She was like, "You need to go to my person." And so it was just constant. And I was like, I don't think I can do the pigtails. So we sat down, and immediately she gave the menus back to the waiter, who she knew very well, and she told me what we were eating. It was lobster Benedict with iced coffee, and that's what we were going to have, decaf coffee also. So she knew I was there to talk about her donation and to find out how she wanted to get involved in the organization. But very quickly, she artfully hijacked the conversation, and I was being probed of my personal life from birth till now. And so at the end of this experience, much to my surprise, I answered all of her questions because it felt like I was talking to an old friend. And that was Joy's gift. The gift that Joy may be remembered for most is her, obviously you all know, her innate ability to connect with and comfort and empower people to make positive changes in their life. That gift is also what drove her passion to give back to the community. Joy supported arts, education, health and human services, food and housing shelters, resources for disaster relief, women's issues, and she was especially connected to issues related to domestic violence. In 2000, the year 2000, she created the Joy to the World Foundation. And to support these organizations across the world. She gave in New York City, she gave in New Orleans. When her daughter moved to DC, her daughter would bring her new amazing organizations that she wanted to see some change in, and so they would make these investments together. Her dream was to make the world a better place. And in the years to come, Joy had plans to expand her foundation and take a more active role herself and a focused role in providing resources. And one of the areas that we talked hours and hours about was expanding opportunities in education for at-risk and underserved populations. She was interested specifically in helping students who otherwise would not have the financial means to fulfill their educational goals. So in the last few months, Joy and I have been spending hours, many hours, sometimes before a show, sometimes after a show, but we worked together to achieve her vision. So I'm really pleased to share that in her honor, the foundation will carry on through the faithful stewardship of her daughter Patience and her sister Alana. And while she is the driving force, she was the driving force, I should say, what I call the joyride behind this effort, it will be my greatest gift to continue to help to make that happen. So as we say goodbye to a dear friend, I hope you will join me in the years to come to carry on her work.
When Joy loves somebody, she really loves somebody. And our final speaker is the driving force behind the on-air tribute, the gathering tonight, for which I know he is very, very grateful that you were able to come and reminisce about Dr. Joy. He is the tireless advocate for our business, and he's the go-to guy. Every time, one of us gets in trouble, he's the one who goes running to the airwaves and defends us and defends our industry and represents our industry in a magnificent way. Please join me in welcoming back the editor and publisher of Talkers Magazine, Mr. Michael Harrison.
I have a couple of messages to read. I have absolutely nothing to say at this point. I've so spoken out about Joy Browne that I think I'm going to have to meditate for about a year and find my way through the world without her in it. But I have a message here from Joy's sister, Alana Sinclair. I had the opportunity to meet every one of her family members through email and tweets and texts and phone calls, but I've never met anybody in her family in person. Still haven't to this day. So it's all kind of a mysterious audio and literary relationship. But I feel like I know them very well, and now I'm an honorary Oppenheim family brother, and very proud of that. All of her siblings are different, and they've all pointed that out to me. Each one of them is a different type of person, and they're all proud of their individualism. Her sister, Alana Sinclair, who has tremendous heart, wrote this message. She said that she wishes she could be here in person tonight, and she wanted to share this message. As you all might know, my Dr. Joy has touched countless people around the world in very meaningful and unique ways. So rather than share any more of my personal stories, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation for the many hours of effort and the labor of love from every single person involved for the last 4.5 weeks. The outpouring of respect, concern, and inspiration on the 3-day radio tribute just days after my sister's transition has been a source of great support for me. The format, along with a gentle and thoughtful moderation, also gave me the opportunity to join in on the conversation, share my feelings along with her listeners, and hear new information about Dr. Joy from media leaders in her industry. I got to experience the far-ranging impact of my sister's voice, and yes, she was and continues to be truly inspirational. Please know that your gift of time and energy has brought me much comfort, healing, and joy. And that's from Alana Sinclair. One of her brothers, Daniel, who I believe he signs his letters somewhere in Europe. I had the great honor of being present at Mother Emanuel AME Church in South Carolina when Vice President Joe Biden spoke to the grieving congregation. Having just recently lost his son, Bo, all he could say was, "I sit here with you." I have no profound words, but the only hope that, like me, You hold Joy as being professional, dedicated, wise, sweet, and a complete whack job. Like you, I will miss her dearly. Daniel, somewhere in Europe. I received this message from Joy's nephew, Joe Russo, and his wife, Kazuka Yazunari. Warm greetings to everyone who's gathered for this celebration of Joy. Unfortunately, we could not join you in person, but we wanted to share our memories with you. I never really knew Dr. Joy because I grew up with Aunt Joy. Joy at the Thanksgiving table and the holidays, and family stories of road trips and pet dogs and spaghetti sandwiches. Even when I saw her photo in magazines and books in stores, she was always first and foremost my aunt. One of our favorite memories of my aunt is from October 2008. We had the chance to spend a couple of nights in New York just in time for our 4th wedding anniversary. Joy arranged a place for us to stay and took us out for a wonderful anniversary brunch of pancakes with the most amazing whipped cream. After brunch, she recommended that we take the Staten Island ferry and go play for the day before she hugged us and trotted off to take the subway to work. I seem to remember her in a studded leather jacket and miniskirt. Everything she did for us that day left both of us with magical memories, and I'm sure everyone gathered here today has similar stories. Joy always embodied her namesake, but it was not just about being joyful. She had a wonderful talent at spreading that joy to others. All of us are blessed to have been touched by joy. And that is from her nephew, Joe Russo, and his wife, Kazuka Yasunari. And I received this letter. I received a lot of letters. I'm only gonna read one more. This is not from a family member, but it's from somebody very special. And I think it's a good example of the unexpected people that popped up who reached out to Joy Memory Central, which people like Ted Anderson and me and all the people in this room in one way or another have been involved in keeping the memory and the spirit of this great woman alive for as long as possible in this very noisy world at this very transitional period of history. This letter really did it for me. I've only met this man for one dinner several years ago. Never spoke to him other than for a few minutes. Hello, Michael. I hope all is well with you. So grateful to learn that you and so many other greats of our industry are paying tribute to the wonderful life and career of Joy Browne. During her tenure at WABC, I had a chance to interact with her on a regular basis. Joy was such a thoughtful, considerate, and warm spirit, and despite her becoming a celebrity, and put that in quotes, she never acted out of the diva script. We put diva in quotes, but remained a delightful person to know. I was so saddened to read of her sudden passing. Life is short, but Joy certainly made the most of it. She will be dearly missed, but also dearly remembered by those of us who had the opportunity to work with her. Again, thank you, and everybody who's honoring her life. I wish I could be there with you. Very best always, James Golden of the Rush Limbaugh Show. James Golden is a longtime producer and very close confidant, one of the central figures in Rush Limbaugh's show and career. Wonderful guy, and I wouldn't be surprised if Rush Limbaugh was somehow also involved in passing these sentiments along. Standing outside the theater tonight, we're very proud of our artwork. This was done by the Talkers Art Department, and I figured, what are we going to do? You know, is it going to be morose? Is it going to be a funereal? It's going to be bright. You know, this theater. Where would we have this meeting? We had nothing to go on. There was no funeral. This is it. This is it. And I'm standing outside the theater, and actually Doug Steffen called me at my hotel, and he says, I'm here early. I said, well, you're the first one. He said, I'm standing in front of the theater, and there are people stopping at the poster. We have a poster in front of the theater that we made that's similar to this. Very joyous celebration of joy in memory of our beloved friend and colleague, and the dates. And he said there are people standing there, am I right, Doug?
Yeah.
Looking at him, I didn't know that Joy Browne died. And they were expressing grief. And when I got here, I'm watching people stopping. One woman in particular, she looks, huh? This was just a passerby on the street. Huh? Dr. Joy Browne died? And I'm just standing there watching. I wish I had a camera just to capture this, where the rubber meets the road. The people that listened to her, the population, not a gathering of industry people and close friends. Right on the street. She goes, oh my. And she was like physically shaken. She takes out her cell phone and calls somebody to tell them. And in spite of the obituary in the New York Times and the radio shows that we did and the Facebook and all of that, what I said a few moments ago, it is a noisy world. There are people that don't know that Joy Browne died. There are people that don't know that Joy Browne was on the radio. There are people that don't know there's radio on the radio. We're at a really peculiar time in the radio industry. As a matter of fact, we're at a peculiar time in anything that we call mass media. Mass media is gone. We're all in our own little fractures of the world. I mean, that's why I say this is it. This is the heart and soul of Joy Browne's closest friends who could be here. I'm not saying there aren't people all over the country, but it's just a profound time. And what Joy Browne represented, and I love the First Amendment, and I love political talk radio, and I love, somebody had mentioned, radio isn't always kind. It sometimes can be nasty, and it could be really rough, and it could be brutal in many ways. I'm all for that. I support that. I support the left, the middle, the right. I support the politics. But it killed me that this was basically all that was left of something else in our industry, which, aside from my own personal motivation to get involved, which was just like running into a burning building, I'll do it. I just was very shocked, as you all were. The loss of Joy Browne on the radio is a loss for our culture. It's a loss for the radio industry. It's a loss for the diversity, for all the things that we could be with this marvelous medium of radio. The stories that were being told before about the radio station psychologist, everybody, David mentioned, radio was a melting pot of diverse disciplines. And when I sat in on this program with her listeners, it was the most extraordinary, cathartic event that I've ever done as a broadcaster. It touched me, it moved me, it drained me, and it pained me. Because how long can you keep doing tribute shows and the world moves on? I only hope that each and every one of us here can, through our conversations with people, through our own influence, if we have any, keep in mind that radio and media and communications can help people get through life. They talk about radio being this medium that comes in handy when there's a hurricane. And I often say radio is the sterno of media. Of course, that's a reference. Most people look at me if they're under 50 years old and they go, what's sterno? The radio should not be the sterno of media. Radio does not have to be what you turn to when the lights go out and the flood waters are rising, although it's good that it does that, because there are crises and pain and suffering and loneliness and fear all across the country, all across the world, all across the human condition, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's what this woman represented in terms of the power of radio. And I only hope that the main captains of industry in the radio industry have a little place in their heart for the culture that we seem to be in the final years of. And the passing of this woman, it's like a big chunk of the ice glaciers that are falling into the ocean just It was like when John Lennon died. You know, they're not going. The Beatles are never going to get back together. And we don't have this shining example of what the full diverse picture of contemporary pop culture and media can be. So, the babblings of an old man who is very sentimental and feels that there's a lot more to this, and I'm so glad to be in the company of everybody here. This is a very special gathering of friends to talk about what joy meant to each and every one of us and to the greater world. And let's carry on her spirit and be a little idealistic and hope for the best. Today is Bernadette and my 7th anniversary. We were married 7 years ago. And each of us knew Joy Browne as personal friends prior to getting together. So she knew Joy and I knew Joy. So I remember the day I went to tell Joy, guess who the new woman in my life is? And she sat there and she says, tell me. And it was her face. And it became, I actually said on the air, it was a 3-way, and then Doug heard it, and he said, oh, a 3-way? No, it wasn't a 3-way. But we had a really special, we had a really special relationship, as did everyone else. And I think that one of the things that everybody is shocked at when they find out about Joy Browne was how many people she called Cookie. Pierre said, you thought you were the only cookie, huh? But she meant it for you, she meant it for me, and she meant it for everybody else. She meant it. She had a big heart. We will bring this to a conclusion. We have coffee, we have cake. If you want to hang around, we've got the theater for another half hour or so. Please, stay around and let's talk. But I want to thank you all, and I want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank Mike Gallagher for stepping up to the plate, doing a great job, Mike. Thank you. All the speakers, thank you very much. And let's keep the spirit of Dr. Joy Browne alive. Thank you all.